36 years old, sitting at a kitchen table late at night, staring at a bank account that has almost nothing invested in it, doing quiet math on a phone calculator and not liking the answer. That scene plays out for millions of people every single year, usually accompanied by the same sinking thought, I am too late, everyone else already has a decade of investing behind them, and I am starting from zero. Here is what almost nobody tells that person at the kitchen table. 10 years of delay does have a real, calculable cost, a number most people never actually run, and it is larger than most people guess. It is easy to feel that number in a vague, anxious way without ever actually knowing what it is, which is often worse than knowing, because the imagination tends to fill in a scarier figure than the real one, or sometimes a smaller one that leads to complacency instead of action. But 36 is not too late, not even close, and the actual math behind starting now, today, at whatever age you happen to be reading this, tells a far more encouraging story than the panic in that kitchen usually allows for. Stay with me, because I am going to show you both numbers, the honest cost of the 10 years you cannot get back, and the surprisingly achievable path that still exists from exactly where you are standing right now, because both of those numbers matter, and only showing you one of them would be lying to you. Meet two people, Alex and James, both aiming for the same retirement age of 65. Alex started investing at $26,500 a month into a simple low-cost index fund, and never stopped, treating it as an unremarkable line item that left his account automatically before he ever saw the money. James is 36 today, has never invested a dollar, and is finally sitting down to start, also planning to contribute $500 a month into the same kind of fund, using the same assumptions, the same 8% average return, the same everything except the calendar. On paper, they are aiming at the exact same target, the exact same monthly contribution, the exact same retirement age. The only difference between them is 10 years, a single decade sitting between when Alex began and when James is beginning. That decade sounds small when you say it out loud, 10 years out of an entire working life, barely more than a rounding error. It does not behave like a rounding error once the math actually runs, and understanding exactly why is the entire point of what James wishes someone had explained to him years ago. Back when 36 still felt young enough that starting seemed like something he could always get to later, without ever quite deciding when later was supposed to arrive. Here is the part almost nobody says out loud, the quiet, specific shame that comes with realizing you spent your 20s not thinking about any of this. James is not proud of it. He watched friends start contributing to retirement accounts in their first real jobs while he was focused on rent, student loans, and simply getting through each month, and somewhere along the way, investing became one of those things he meant to start eventually, the way people mean to start going to the gym eventually. The way people mean to start going to the gym eventually. There was no single decision to skip a decade of investing, just years of small postponements that quietly added up into one large one, each individual month feeling completely reasonable to skip, none of them feeling like the decision that would eventually cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in future growth. Now, at 36, scrolling through articles about compound growth and retirement calculators, James feels a specific kind of dread, the sense that the best window already closed, that whatever he does now is somehow just cleanup after the fact, a consolation prize for people who missed the real opportunity. That feeling is completely understandable, and it is also based on an incomplete picture, because it treats every year of investing as equally important, when the truth is considerably more useful than that, and considerably kinder to someone starting later than they wish they had. Let's look at the actual numbers behind Alex's 10-year head start. At 8% average annual growth, contributing $500 a month, Alex's account after 10 years, the exact 10 years James does not have, sits at roughly $90,000. That $90,000 then keeps compounding for the remaining 29 years until age 65, without a single additional dollar required, simply from growth alone, at 8% a year, quietly working in the background regardless of what else happens in Alex's life during those decades. $90,000 compounding for 29 years at 8% grows to approximately $900,000 on its own, from that first decade of contributions alone. That is the real cost of a delayed start, not the 10 years of $500 payments James missed, which only total $60,000, but the extra decades those specific dollars had to compound before retirement, which turned $60,000 of missed contributions into roughly $900,000 of missed future value. The math is not punishing James for the decade he lost, the math is simply honest about how much additional time that decade would have been given to grow, and time, more than any other single variable, is the actual engine behind long-term compound growth, more important even than the size of any single contribution. Now let's run both accounts all the way to age 65, side by side, with identical $500 monthly contributions the entire time. Alex, contributing from 26 to 65, 39 years total, ends with approximately $1,437,000. James, contributing the same $500 a month from 36 to 65, 29 years total, ends with approximately $624,000. The gap between them, roughly $813,000, is the real, honest price of the missing decade, and it deserves to be said plainly instead of softened, because pretending that gap does not exist would not actually help James make better decisions today, and vague reassurance has never once closed an actual dollar gap for anyone. But here is the number that matters just as much, and the one almost nobody puts next to the first one. $624,000 is still an enormous amount of money, built from a completely ordinary $500 monthly habit starting at an age most people consider comfortably mid-career, not late, not desperate, simply human, and simply the age James happens to be. Here is what James actually wishes someone had told him on day one, instead of just showing him the size of the gap. The gap is not fixed. If James increases his monthly contribution from $500 to $1,000, doubling what Alex originally committed to, his 29-year total climbs to approximately $1,247,000, closing almost the entire $813,000 gap using nothing more exotic than contributing a larger amount starting immediately. This is not a trick, and it is not risk-free, since finding an extra $500 a month is a genuinely difficult adjustment for most household budgets, but it is a completely real, mathematically verified path that exists specifically because James is starting at 36 with 29 years of runway still ahead of him, not 2 years, not 5 years, 29. Even a smaller adjustment matters here. Raising the monthly contribution from $500 to $750, only half of a full doubling, still pushes James's 29-year total to roughly $935,000, cutting the original gap by more than a third with a change most people could realistically fit into a normal budget over time. Every year James waits past today shortens that runway and makes the required catch-up contribution larger, which is precisely why the version of this video that matters most is not the one comparing James to Alex, it is the one comparing James starting today to James starting at 37, or 40, or 45, because that is the actual decision sitting in front of him right now. None of this is about telling James that starting at 36 was a mistake he now has to punish himself for, and it is certainly not a story about Alex being smarter or more disciplined than James for starting a decade earlier. Alex simply happened to learn about compound growth 10 years sooner, often through nothing more meaningful than an early job that offered a retirement plan by default, while James spent that same decade working through genuinely difficult financial circumstances that Alex may never have faced at all. Circumstances that had nothing to do with intelligence or willpower and everything to do with the ordinary unfairness of different starting points in life. Comparing the two of them as a measure of character misses the entire point of the math. What actually matters is not which starting age someone reads about in a video, it is the specific, calculable gap between the age they are right now and the number 65, and whether they are willing to run their own version of this calculation honestly instead of either panicking over the lost decade or pretending it does not matter at all. Both of those reactions skip the useful part, which is simply doing the math for your own actual age, your own actual contribution, and your own actual timeline, and then deciding what to do with the answer, whether that means increasing a monthly contribution, adjusting a target retirement age, or simply accepting a smaller final number in exchange for starting today instead of waiting for a more comfortable moment that may never actually arrive. If there is one thing James wishes he had understood at 26, it is not that he should have started earlier, although that is obviously true, it is that starting later does not erase the value of starting at all, it simply changes the size of the number waiting at the end and the size of the monthly habit required to reach it. 36 is not the finish line for building real wealth, and it is not some tragic late entry into a race that was already decided. The only genuinely wasted years are the ones spent knowing this math exists and still not starting, and if you are reading this at 36, 42, or 50, sitting at your own kitchen table doing your own quiet math, the honest answer is the same one James eventually arrived at. The best time to start was years ago, and the second best time is tonight.